Very nice, so let's get started. Please create a folder on your disk. Oh, I have to open my notes to the side. Give me a second, I will do that. Create a new folder. I will call it Minesweeper, because this is the game that we are going to use to practice our HTML and JavaScript skills. And then I would suggest opening up Visual Studio Code. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code in this course. Entirely Visual Studio Code. I will not use Visual Studio, especially when we reach the second semester, when we talk about ASP.NET Core. Obviously, you have the choice. If you prefer Visual Studio over Visual Studio Code, feel free to do so. If you prefer Writer, feel free to do so. If you prefer WebStorm, feel free to do so. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code because it's the tool that I like most for developing Angular and C#. Okay? But it's up to you. You're old enough to choose your own tools. So, what do we have to do in order to develop our small little Minesweeper game? We are going to start very easy, just with HTML and JavaScript, without any tools. No tooling at all. So let's create an index.html page. Let's create an index.js file, and let's create a styles.css file. So we have a little bit of stuff to get started. In the HTML file, I hope you can remember, there is something which is called emmet abbreviations. You can simply type HTML, and here you see the emmet abbreviations. And you can simply choose HTML5, press enter, and you get a nice little template with which you can get started. I will call it Minesweeper. If you are new to Visual Studio Code, these emmet abbreviations are super handy. So if you, for instance, want to have an H1 tag, just type H1. You get the emmet abbreviation, press enter, and you can immediately type on it. If you want to have a table, just press enter, and you get a table, and th, and so on. I think you get the idea. That's very useful. You get pretty fast when you use these emmet abbreviations. They are built into Visual Studio Code. Nice, let's include our script file. That's a simple one. You already had, I think, web development in the previous years, so you should know the basics about all this stuff. So we say source is index.js, nothing special, and we are good. And last but not least, let's add the style sheet. The ghost font that you see here, that is GitHub Copilot. I'm using GitHub Copilot, and especially during the lectures, I'm going to use GitHub Copilot, and I'm going to give you tips when I use which AI. Okay, so I will tell you and advise you how you can use AI-based tools, but please keep in mind, during exams you will not have an AI available. So make sure to practice this stuff before the exams without an AI and without internet. That's an important one. So here we just need a link, and we need to add the link to styles. Good. I'm quite happy with that, but something is missing. I would like to have nice little formatting for all my files. Question: are you familiar with the editor config project? You aren't? Okay, then you learned something new. First new thing in this course. Very popular, very widely used. Editor config is the name of the project. When you see the logo, maybe you can remember that you have heard about it. Essentially, in the past, when I was young, old man talking, when I was young, people had to agree on one development environment when they work in a team, because they had to agree on certain settings. Do you want to use tabs or spaces? Do you want to indent by 2 spaces or 4 spaces? Do you want to have the curly braces in the same line as the if? Or do you want to have it in the next line? Those settings were specific to every development environment. And then came editor config. Editor config is an open source project where certain formatting rules are defined in a in an editor independent way. And every editor, Visual Studio Code, and many others, they simply accept editor config files. Okay? So let's go here and create an editor config file with a dot at the beginning. Sorry, I forgot that one. It is important that you install the first tools here. There is an extension to Visual Studio Code which is called Editor Config for VS Code. If you haven't installed it already, please do so, because that will help you to work with editor config files. I already have installed it. If you have it, wonderful. If you don't have it, please install it. By the way, I have shown you the course repository. That is 2024. Yep, this one. No. Good. I've shown you the course repository, and it's here. And in the course repository, you see my notes for today's lecture. And in the notes for today's lecture, you find a folder which is called .vscode. And here you find a file which is called extensions.json. If you copy this file into your solution, Visual Studio Code will automatically suggest you those extensions which I encourage you to install. So if you open my sample solution after this lecture, Visual Studio Code will automatically remind you, hey, you haven't installed this thing, and Mr. Schrobeck asked you to. Do you want to install it? You simply say yes, and you have all your tools set up. Good? During exams, by the way, you will have time at the beginning to set up your Visual Studio Code, including internet access. So when we do an exam, you have, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes time. You can install plugins, whatever you want in Visual Studio Code before we turn off the internet. So please come prepared and have a mental list of extensions that you want to use during coding. Are we good? Same will be true with your final exam, with your Matura. Will be exactly the same process. Question?
Will you be able to use a WebStorm?
That's a very good question if we have WebStorm available in our IT rooms.
Yeah.
If you have it, you can use it. That's perfectly fine. Yep. Whatever you have, use it. If you have problems or if you are unsure, ask our administrator, Thomas, and he can answer you any questions, maybe regarding to licenses and things like that. Good question.
WebStorm be available at the Matura?
Same answer. If it is in the IT rooms available, it will be available during the Matura too. But I'm not an expert on JetBrains tools, so please ask our admin staff. They can answer all these questions, but we have a little bit of time until the Matura, so let's see what's going to happen. Okay, good. So now we have an editor config file, and we need to fill out the editor config file. And here I typically ask for the help of AI, because, I don't know the format of editor config from the top of my mind. So what I do is I use GitHub Copilot. Let me ask you a question. Who in this room does not have GitHub Copilot? Okay, I highly encourage you to get it. You get it for free as students. You get it for free. You do not need to pay for it. So it helps you a lot. Let me show you how this works. Here, for instance, I'm going to say I need an editor config file for HTML, JavaScript, CSS. Can you help? And we typically get a decent suggestion that we can then use as a basis. Let's see. You see, it's the root file. That's okay. We use spaces, indentation of 2, line feed, UTF-8, trim trailing white spaces. So white spaces at the end of the line are removed, and insert final new line is good. HTML indent sizes, that's all the same as up above here, so I think we can get rid of that one. Okay, that's a decent setting. I think we can use that. And if I go here and format this stuff, you immediately see that now we have an indentation of 2. So this is what I wanted. For those of you who do not have GitHub Copilot available, you do not need to type that. I will send this code to you via Discord in a second. Now, editor config is one thing, but we need more. We need more to prettify our code. For instance, if we forget a semicolon at the end of the line, we do not need to correct such a mistake by hand. So we need a code formatter which goes hand in hand with our editor config file. Before we have a question. Yes, please.
How do you update your index HTML?
What do you mean? How do I format it? Right mouse click, and then you have format document, and the shortcut is Shift-Alt-F. See it? I am very sorry, I have no idea how to do that in WebStorm. Okay, very good. So you have colleagues who can help you. Nice, code formatter. Now for code formatting, I'm going to use a tool which is called Prettier. Are you familiar with Prettier? Prettier is really nice. So let's create a Prettier file, .prettierrc. That's a config file, as you can see it here, .prettierrc. And of course we are going to install a plugin again, and this plugin is called Prettier. And here it is. It's a really nice code formatter. I like it. I'm going to use it. You do not absolutely need to use it. If you have another code formatter like ESLint, which you like more or something like this, feel free to do so. This is a code formatter. This goes beyond simply editor config stuff, like adding a semicolon at the end of the line. You know, some JavaScript developers, they insist on semicolons at the end of the line. But there are other JavaScript developers who say, I don't need a semicolon at the end of the line. So that is the kind of setting we are talking about here. Again, I do not know the Prettier settings from the top of my mind, so I'm going to use AI again. I fire up GitHub Copilot and I will ask GitHub Copilot, please provide meaningful settings for Prettier for HTML, JS, CSS project. I'm always polite to AIs because you never know when they take over the world, and they will remember. Print width is the line width. I like to work with pretty long lines. 150 characters seems okay for me. Tab width is kind of duplicated from editor config, but fine. Semicolon at the end, I typically say true. I like semicolons at the end. I like single quotes instead of double quotes. You can choose it on your own. Trailing comma means that if you define a JavaScript object, then the last element in the object has a trailing comma, a comma at the end. It's not that important. I like it. Bracket spacing, I typically set it to true. We don't use JSX, so we can remove that if you want. Arrow parents are, I don't know, this is if you define a lambda function, whether you want to have parentheses always or not. I go with always. I like that very much. HTML whitespace sensitivity CSS. Yeah, it's okay. That's about how to format HTML. And at the end of the line, I want to have a line feed and no carriage return. For me, these settings are fine. I will send you these settings via Discord if you don't have an AI to build them. So now we have set up a nice little project. I really like it. I think we can start coding, right? Good. So let's get started. The first thing that I would like to do is I would like to set up the HTML. And what by the way, we are not going to use any framework here. No Angular, no React, no Bootstrap, plain vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to get started. But we are going to change that over time, okay? So let's start with a kind of root node. That's always a good thing to put something into a root div so that we have something that we can format later on. I will call it content. Then we need something where we can place the Minesweeper cells. So in this case, I'm going to use again a div. Let's call this one, this is the app. Here we are going to use JavaScript as you suggested in the brainstorming session before. that we are going to build the Minesweeper field using JavaScript. And maybe we can add a paragraph element, call it message. There we can print messages like game over or you won or something like this. Do you think this is useful? Is that okay for you? Nice. Very nice. Let's immediately start it. Give me a second. Let's immediately start it. The question is, how can we start this application? I don't know how you did it so far, but I like another extension in Visual Studio Code, which is called Liveserver. Have you ever used Liveserver before? And I immediately see that I installed the wrong one. I want to have this one, the Liveserver. So you know what a Liveserver is? I guess you have installed the Liveserver on your machine. If you have, that's very nice, because once it is installed, give my laptop a second. It's already installing the Liveserver. It's only a matter of seconds. Here it is. Then you should have down here a button which says Open Liveserver, it says. Okay, click on it. That starts a web server, opens a browser, and if we take a look at the developer tools, we are going to see that we have our application here. See? This is what we wanted. It worked pretty nicely. Everything is here. We now have a web server that we can use. Okay, some of you are going to use WebStorm. Do you have similar capabilities in WebStorm?
Yes.
Or do you need help for that? Everything fine? Awesome. Like that. Perfect. Good. Let's get started. In index.js, if you use an AI to do some coding, it's always a good idea to tell the AI what you are going to do. So the first thing, what I'm going to do here is I'm writing a comment telling the AI simple Minesweeper game. Okay. Now the AI knows what to do. We don't need any modules because we write it with vanilla.js. First thing, let's define a bunch of constants. Const. Let's start with width. Width should be 10. Now the AI kicks in and helps me a lot. It tells me that the height will be 10. It tells me that we are going to have 10 mines. Now we need some symbols. Let's say const flag symbol. Let's simply use emojis, okay? Flag. Let's see. Come on. Flag. I will take this flag. I like that flag. Windows dot. Yes, Windows dot. Const mine symbol. Oh, we don't need a mine symbol. We need an explode symbol. Yep. Let's take this explode symbol. And I think with that we are good. Quick question. If I would ask you, what is the difference between a const and let in TypeScript or in JavaScript? It's essentially the same. What would you answer? Yes?
You can't change it.
You can change it, okay?
It's a different scope. Let is only in the current scope, and const is not.
I'm not sure about the scope. What I wanted to hear, you already said it. Const cannot be changed after the symbol has been declared. Let can be changed after the symbol has been declared. Please take close note at whether you use const or let. So I can say let I equals 5, I plus plus. This is possible because it's let. If you say const, this is not possible. In JavaScript, system doesn't complain here. It will complain at runtime, but in TypeScript you immediately get an error. This is not okay. Here you would use a let, okay? You wanted to add something.
Yes, you can't change stuff when you have a constant. You only can't reassign. So if you have an object, you can still edit the object.
Yeah, that's an important one. If you have a const, it's a shallow immutable. Means, let me show you that. Const my array. I will delete this code again just to describe it. Now, the my array is a constant. I cannot reassign it. I can't say my array equals to new array. This is not okay. But what I can do is I can say my array.push. Something like this, 42 or something like this. This is okay. Because this only changes the content of the object, not the identity of the object. Can you remember that from previous years? Wonderful. Please pay close note when you do some coding in my class. Now, of course, we need a reference to our app. How do we get a reference to an element in HTML in JavaScript? Do you know it? Yeah, if you want to use the element by ID, that's perfectly fine. So what we can do is we can say here, come on, document that .get element by ID. The other option that you would have, if you don't have an ID, you can say query selector or query selector all, if you want to use a CSS query. But yeah, that's it. For now, I'm going to say document get element by ID and call it app. That's fine. We also need the message, const message. That is a document get element by ID message. I like that. Good. Now let's create the different divs for the board. We need to have 10 by 10 elements. So what are we going to do? We're going to use a for loop, right? Very simple. So for let y, and the rest will be done by our nice little friendly AI. And let me tell you a little bit here. Now, if I zoom in here a little bit, do you see the ghost font? This is why I love AI. I love AI for coding. Because I don't know if you know the feeling. Sometimes you already have a picture in your mind what you would like to write. And it's kind of boring to watch yourself typing. Do you know this feeling? You know that you have to write the next 5 lines and you sit down and think, hey, why do I have to write it? And then you misspell it and you already want to go on because you have the next great idea. And in those situations, AI is awesome. Because if you know what you want to do next, there is a very good chance that the AI also knows and it can complete your thoughts. This is why I really love AI, at least at the current state of development. We will see how AI works in 5 years, in 10 years. I don't know, nobody knows. But for those small tasks, AI is super useful. I would love to give you AI at exams too, but I described to you why this is currently not possible. If this is going to change, we are going to change this policy. But for now, during the lecture, it's really useful. I will, in my case here, simply say tab and then edit what it suggested me. It said y from 0 to height, x from 0 to width. That looks very good. Then it creates a div that also looks quite good. Then it assigns a class name. It calls it cell. I think that's decent. However, I think we are going to use this class name in more situations, so I'm going to use a constant for it. Okay? So let's call it cell class. I'll call it cell here. And then we are going to say cell class here. The dataset stuff is not necessary, and this appends everything to the app. I like that. So obviously we have to format our cell a little bit. So I go to styles.css and then I'm going to define this cell class. And what will be the cell class? Let's say we have a width of 50 pixel. Let's say a height of 50 pixel. Let's say we have a border, 1 pixel solid black. Let's define a background color, which could be gray. Something like this. And that's good. Let's put it that way. Of course, we are going to change our styles a little bit in a minute or so. but I think for now that's kind of okay. But you know what? I'm going to use dark gray for the cells which are closed, and I'm going to use normal gray for the cells which already have opened. So I like this one. So let's take a look at the output. Does this look like Minesweeper? Not really. So, give me ideas. What could we do in CSS magic in order to make this Minesweeper stuff? Let's do some brainstorming. Ideas, yes.
What I did is I took the main element.
Yep.
From JavaScript I got its width and its height.
Yeah.
So I calculated in the code the width and height of each cell respective to the constants. And then I set a display flex, a flex wrap, and I set all the sizes.
Okay. Okay. Good idea. Yeah. And what? Oh yeah. And this is what I would like to go for. I love the grid in this case. So how can we use a grid? Well, not very difficult, because in HTML, luckily, we have a parent element. Your idea was also quite good, but I think the grid is even simpler. Let's define the app here, as you can see it here, and we simply say display grid. Okay? Now, in this display grid, this doesn't help you, this doesn't solve all your problems. What we need to do in JavaScript is a single line of code. We need to go for the app and define a style, and you already see what the AI suggests. Let's accept it and then let's discuss it. Please note, if you are not familiar with CSS Grid, I used in the parent element display grid, and I'm saying repeat with, this is 10 elements, 1FR. 1FR is not perfectly right. Let's say auto. So I'm telling the system, please repeat 10 divs per row or column. It doesn't matter, because in this case we have rows and columns with the same size. Understand what I mean? And if we take a look at the output, we immediately get something which comes a little bit closer to a Minesweeper field. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have white spaces here in the middle. We have to get rid of them, but essentially it's working really nicely. Let me show you what this repeat really does. If we say, for instance, instead of width, we say 5 and auto. You see, now we have 5 columns. And each column has 20 cells. Got it? If I say 2 columns, it's not very difficult. We have 2 columns with 50 cells in each column. If I say 20 columns, I have, you guessed correctly, 20 columns with 5 elements in them. Isn't that a nice little thing in order to get such elements? So if you build tic-tac-toe, Connect 4, a chess game, whatever, it's really simple to do with the CSS Grid. CSS Grid is magic. It's so good. Also for data-driven applications. If you implement a form, for instance, and you would like to lay out the labels and the input fields, it works like a charm. CSS Grid is one of our lightning talks. So we will have, hopefully, a lightning talk about a Flexbox and CSS Grid, and we will hear a little bit about it. Yes, question?
I have a problem with finding the app element.
You have a problem with finding the app element, and I'm going to help you. One last thing before we go into a break. How can we get rid, how can we get rid of the white spaces in between?
We set the margin and the other thing to 0 for every element.
For every element. So you think that saying margin 0 and padding 0 will do the trick? I don't think so. I don't think so. The problem here is that the div of the app, this one, always takes 100% of the size. So this thing here is always 100%. This is by design. So what we can do is we can change the content, for instance. Let me show you what I mean. Hashtag content. And we can tell the content that we want to have a display and use an inline block. Inline block means that it does not take the entire space, but only the space it really needs. And if you do that, voila, magic, we have a Minesweeper field with only a few lines of code. Let me close, before we go into the break, let me close by emphasizing how important CSS is. CSS is, I think, one of the most underrated programming languages that there are. I know so many people who look a little bit down on front-end developers because they are just hacking in some JavaScript, but we as the back-end developers, we write Rust code and it's so efficient, and front-end development is an art. It's really powerful. Front-end experts are really thought after. They are important, and CSS allows you to do so many great things. I know that many people hate CSS because it's not always the best. Sometimes I curse CSS too, but I mentioned it already in many of my talks. I have a joker, which is my wife. She's a professional web developer for 20 years, and she knows everything about CSS. So whenever I have a problem, I shout, hey, I need help, and I get help. But yeah, I really think that CSS is super, super important. You see, with just a few lines of code, we could create a really nice Minesweeper cell. Good, we are at 9:44, so we now have a break. And after the break, we are going to add a little bit of behavior. And I'm not sure if we are going to finish the entire game today, because that's not my point. I would like to have enough time to do the transition from JavaScript to TypeScript and talk about certain TypeScript tools. TypeScript compiler flags. We are going to use a tool which is called Vite to do continuous integration, and let's see how we are going to progress. For now, let's do a break. Okay, we did a quick exercise or a quick trial with GPT-4o1, and it solved our entire exercise, but nevertheless now we have to go back to our manual coding because we have seen that the AI also made mistakes. It generated code that threw some exceptions, so we need to be able to read code and we need to be able to correct code. So let's continue with our small little game and let's add rudimentary event handling. I would like to be able to click on a cell. This is what I would like to do. Let me show you how we could approach that, and let's talk a little bit about what we do here. That's a kind of repetition of some basic JavaScript stuff. Not basic, more advanced JavaScript stuff, but just to refresh your mind. You already had JavaScript classes in your previous years. Let's create a function. Let's call it handle cell click. Oops, sorry. Handle cell click. And let's say we want to have X and Y coordinates where the user clicked. And let's simply add a log statement where we print X and Y on the screen. Let's add really basic support for clicking. Now we can go up here, and I would like to make it very simple, and GitHub Copilot immediately tells me what I have to do. I would like to add an event listener on the click event, and we simply call the event tab. Now let's repeat some important things that we see here. How do you call this? What is that? What do you see here? Yes?
I call it an arrow function, a closure, allow them.
Exactly, we have an arrow function, this one. Some people call it a lambda function, arrow function, whatever. This is an anonymous function defined inline here, and this function calls the handle click method that you see down here. Now you also say you see a closure. What is a closure?
What I mean with that is a scope where the variables are taken basically into the lambda, and the lambda can understand those variables, even though the lambda could be pulled from somewhere else. arrow function.
Okay, so what you say is that the closure
Yeah.
captures these two
X.
variables.
Yes.
Here you have the variable y,
Yeah.
here you have the variable x, and this arrow function, this closure, captures the current status of x and y. So what that means is that the system runs through the first loop, this one, y has the value 0. Then the system runs through the first iteration of the second loop. So x has the value 0. Then it comes to this line of code. Oh, let's use a different color here. Then it comes to this line of code, and this column is now, this line is now, listen closely, capturing x and y. Capturing means that it adds an event listener where it replaces, if you want to put it like that, x with 0 and y also with 0, because that's the current value of the loop variables. Understand what I mean? Technically it works a little bit different. It doesn't replace anything, but as a mental picture, you can think, okay, here it will capture the current value and pass on 0, 0. Now, if we go in the next loop iteration, we have x not on the value 0, but on the value 1. That's the next iteration in this for loop. So when it sets up the event listener of the next element, it will then replace the x with a 1 and the y with a 0. So again, it captures the current value of x and y and replaces these variables. Again, technically, it doesn't replace the variables, but I think you get the idea, right? This is what's meant with capturing. The correct wording is closure. You said it correctly. A mental helper for me is always this arrow function and the variables it captures. They are kept close to each other. They are close friends. And that is how you can maybe remember the name closure. So this is what's going to happen here. And let me show you, let me prove to you that this really works. If I click here, you see 0, 0. If I click here, you see 9, 9. See that one? If I click here, 8, 4. And this is exactly what we want. If we go to the development tools, make it a little bit larger, go to page, use our index.js, I set a breakpoint here, and I click here, then you see that x has the value 8, this one, and y has the value 5. So this is where the capturing happened. Did you understand that? Were you able to follow? This is a very, very, very prominent feature in JavaScript. In JavaScript, you do these closures and arrow functions and capturing pretty often. However, you can do exactly the same in C#. You can do exactly the same in Rust. You can do exactly the same in many other programming languages. You have a question?
Ja, wird jetzt für jede Zelle eine Funktion gespeichert? Kann man das auch so sehen?
Okay, what's happening behind the scenes? Now, behind the scenes, this lambda function, this one, is internally turned into a data structure. What it sets up an object where it stores the current value of x. Let's say the current value is 6. And it sets up the current value of y. Let's say the current value is 4. And then it sets up a method, let's call it anonymous, something like this. And this anonymous method will do the handle cell click call with x and y. So instead of having a function here, the system will behind the scenes create an object, capture the current value of the local variable x and y into the object, and the call will not be done to the method, but the call will be done to the member method of the object. So when we enter this method, the captured variable are part of this object. Understood what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is what's going to happen. This is why we have this capturing, and in essence, every captured variable here, or whenever you do capturing in a closure, you end up creating, at least mentally, a separate object. In C#, really a separate class is generated by the compiler. It's called a display class, and it's really allocated on the heap. So you have a heap allocation whenever you do capturing.
Okay.
Does this answer your question?
Yeah.
If somebody couldn't follow, don't worry. These are technical implementation details. I will never ask you how the stuff is implemented. If you understand the mental model, how it works, if you can apply it correctly, I'm perfectly fine. You need to understand that when you dive deep into compilers and things like that. Good? Awesome. Very good. So we can do a handle click. Very nice. Now, how can we do a right click? Does anybody know how we can do a right click? Yes.
The event is called context menu.
Context menu. Okay. This is AI is simply too good. It's simply too good. Cell, add event listener, context menu. What does the prevent default mean here? Yes.
Like when you right click in Chrome normally,
Yeah.
there comes this menu.
Context menu.
To reload and stuff like this.
Wonderful. Exactly, and we want to prevent that. Okay, wonderful. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. And I would say let's create another function. Function handle right click. GitHub Copilot is so good. And let's put it here and let's put it here. Do you see how valuable GitHub Copilot is? Now, let's pause the video for a second and discuss a little bit what that means for the exams in the school. Wonderful. So let's implement the handle cell click stuff, right? Or let's start with the right click. Let's start with the right click. It's a little bit simpler to implement the right click. Now the problem is we now have X and Y, but it's much harder to access the correct cell. Well, what we could do is we could go to the children of the app and look up the correct children, correct child, I'm sorry. But this is not what I want to do, because I would like to exercise a little bit handling of arrays. I would like to store pointers to all the cells that we create in a two-dimensional, not in a two-dimensional array, in a jagged array. Let me show you what I mean. I will write the code and then I will ask you what this code means. So I will do const cells equals this one. Then in the while loop, I'm going to say const row equals this one. Now here, after creating the cell, I'm going to say row push cell. And here, I'm going to say cells push row. My question to you is this line, this line, this line, and this line. What do these lines do? Who can describe it in plain English or German? Yes, please.
So first we create our cells array.
Yes. What is the type of the cells array? The cells array will hold which type of elements?
Any element.
Any elements, but in our concrete situation, what will we put into the cells? Exactly. Cells is an array of arrays. This is what you meant?
Yes.
Yes, very good. Yes, and what's inside the inner array?
Inside the inner array are the cell, so like HTML elements.
The div elements, pointers to the div elements. Exactly. Wonderful. This is exactly what we have. So we have a jagged array. We have an array of arrays, if you want to put it like that. And now inside of the handle cell click, or we said handle cell right click, this is what we are going to start with. We simply can find the cell which we are currently accessing by simply using the y and x coordinate in order to get the correct div. We simply say, okay, I want to have this row and I want to have this column, and we get the div element. Got it? Super. Now let's switch the flag symbol. Cell inner text equals to let's say cell.inner text, if it is a flag symbol, then we remove the flag symbol. If it isn't the flag symbol, we add the flag symbol. Who knows how this construct is called? This question mark colon. Yep. Exactly. Wow, you're good. Ternary operator. I like it. You really have good JavaScript skills. We'll have a lot of fun together. Yes, exactly. That's a ternary operator. And essentially it's an inline if. If you do not like the ternary operator, I'm perfectly fine if you replace that with a regular if statement. So I could say something like this. If you do it like that, here, that's also perfectly fine. So you can freely choose whether you want to do this one or whether you want to do that one. Both styles are perfectly fine. Let's give it a try. If we go to our application and we right click, I get a flag. If I right click again, the flag is gone. Right click, click, right click, click. Okay, the flag isn't very beautiful. It doesn't have the correct size and it is not centered vertically and horizontally. Now, the next thing isn't about coding, it's about, oops, I pressed the wrong button. I'm sorry. I usually develop on a desktop computer at home and I only use this computer when I'm away from home. So I'm not so much used to this keyboard. So sometimes I do something wrong. Okay, good. Let's get rid of all these things. Now, how can we find out what the proper CSS settings are? I see way too many students in this situation going into style CSS and starting to code something here. That's not the correct approach. When you want to work out CSS, please go into the development tools that you see here on the right hand side. Make sure that you select the element tab here. Find the element that you would like to style. This is the element. And then try interactively tweaking around with the CSS so you like what you see. And once you found out interactively visualization that you like, only then you go back to the source code and change the source code accordingly. So for instance, the font size. Let's try it. Font size, let's say 20 pixels. Too small. Let's say 30 pixels. Better. I like 30 pixels. Do you like 30 pixels too? For me, it's okay. Do you understand what I mean? First, I try it interactively in the development tools. And now that I'm happy with it, I can go here and, for instance, say in the cell, font size is, what did we say? 30 pixels. See? Nice. Now it's already here. I can reload it, mark it, looks good. But it's not centered, you see? How can we center it horizontally and vertically? Now this one is a really tricky one. I tell you how I typically do it, and then you can decide whether you find a better solution. In my situation, I switch the cell to display flex and then use here justify content to center and to align items to center. With these three settings here, I can really align the items. Do you see, if I hover over it, Chrome will display that this thing is centered vertically. If I hover here over, it shows me that it centers the element horizontally. And I think the display flex is something that you should know from previous years. If you don't know it, please look it up. We will hopefully have a lightning talk about Flexbox and CSS Grid. Now that I like this thing, I simply copy it out here. I go into my style CSS, I paste it in here, I reload the app, and luckily it works like a charm. Okay? So this is the process that you should follow. Interactively trying in developer tools, and only then you change your source code. Good. Questions? Nice. Very, very nice. Good. I think that is good. We can for now say handle cell right click is okay. We can now talk about the handle cell click. What should we do when the user clicks on a cell? Well, first we can find the cell again. That's an easy one. And I think, yeah, GitHub Copilot is immediately telling us, giving us a good hint. It says, hey, if the user accidentally clicked on a cell which is marked with a flag, we should really ignore the click. I think this is good. I will simply accept that by pressing tab. Now, someone told me in the brainstorming session at the beginning that you think it's a good idea to place the bombs on the first click, right? Okay. Now the question is, where do we store the bombs, the mines? Somewhere, somehow, we need to store where the mines are. Do you have an idea?
Maybe in the inner text.
Yeah, but if we do it in the inner text, the user will see where the mines are. But then the whole idea of the game is no longer interesting. So, good idea, but in our situation, we have to store it somewhere else where it's not visible. You have an idea? Yeah, we could do a two-dimensional or jagged array, and what would you write in this array? True or false? Something like this? That would be an option. Any other options? Yeah.
Es gibt so einen Tag,
Yeah, we could add display data to every single div. We could do that. Another option.
Just a simple one-dimensional array with an object inside.
And simple one-dimensional array with an object inside, and what is in the object?
X and Y.
X and Y. I think this is really a very good idea because we already have X and Y, and it would be very simple to find out where the mines are. Your solution with a two-dimensional array with true and false would be equally nice. When I prepared this lecture, I went for your approach with the one-dimensional array and X and Y, and I would like to go it now. But if you want, you can try it, for instance, at home with the true and false array. It will also work very nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create mines, let mines. What is the value of the variable mines after this line? Who knows that? Yes? No. Any is a data type, not a value. Yep.
Undefined?
Exactly. Yes, mines is undefined. Correct. Mines is undefined. That's an important one. In JavaScript, we don't specify a type. So JavaScript doesn't know what mines is. Could be a string, could be a number, could be an array, could be anything. That's fine. In TypeScript, we will need to add a data type. We will see that later on. Good. Now, inside of mines, in order to tell the GitHub Copilot what it will be, array of mine positions with X and Y. When you use AI, it's always important to tell AI what's your intention behind certain code constructs. In JavaScript, we cannot define a data type. So the AI doesn't understand what you are planning to do. But by adding this nice little comment here, the AI understands what your plan is. This is why Microsoft and GitHub called this product Copilot. You are the pilot. This is the Copilot. The pilot says, we are going to fly to, I don't know, Brazil. And the Copilot will fly. But we have to tell the Copilot where we want to go to. Got it? Good. So TypeScript will be way more expressive. So here, how can we find out whether mines is undefined? Yeah? If not mines. Exactly. This is called truthiness or falsiness. An object reference is falsy if it is undefined or null or something like this. What happens? Quick quiz. What happens if I have a variable? This is 0. If I. Is I true or truthy or falsy? Yep.
My guess would be falsy.
Exactly. If a number is 0, it is falsy. If the number is not 0, it is truthy. Okay? Next quiz. Let string equals something like this. Oh, we had single quotes. Is this truthy or falsy? What do you think?
I would say falsy.
Falsy, exactly. I think your intuition works here very well because you all have an idea. An empty string is falsy. Good. Now, does that make sense? And what does it do? Yep.
But this is true then, some?
No, it's not true. It's false. But that's the point. That's essentially a typecast. Because the first exclamation mark here is turning the falsy into, listen closely, true. Not truthy. After the first exclamation mark, the type changes. It's no longer a string, it's a boolean. And the second exclamation mark turns it back into false, but not falsy. Got it? It's essentially a typecast, what you do here. And that's the strange thing about JavaScript. You are much younger than me, but still, you maybe know the video. Do you know the famous JavaScript what video? Batman video? No? Oh, I have to show you that. No, I will not show you that, but I send you the JavaScript what Batman. This is it. I will send you this link, and that's your homework. Take a look at this video. I've shown it to a lot of JavaScript developers know and love this video. It starts approximately in the middle, before you have some strange things with Ruby and Python, but approximately in the middle, this guy talks about strange things in JavaScript, and it's really, really funny. Don't look at it now, look at it in the break, but you will have a blast. It's pretty old, but still, if you get this video, you are pretty good in JavaScript. Okay, good. Let's go back to our stuff here. So we talked about truthiness and falsiness. So if it's not mines, we have to place the mines. Not on x and y, randomly placed. Do you see what I do? I program in natural language, because now I press enter and I press tab. I wait a little bit and I press tab, and that's essentially it. That is what I mean with you program in natural language. You type in natural language, and then you let the AI do the toil work for you, the work that you do not want to do, because it's really simple. It doesn't add a lot of value writing this code. Let's take a look at this code. We need to understand it. There is a loop here going through all the mines. Then it calculates a random value between width and height. Let's take a look at this because it's important. We will need it also in Angular. Who can describe what this expression does? Yes?
So it generates a random number. And
This one?
with method
Random number between which?
between 0 and 1.
Between 0 and 1, including 0 or excluding 0? Is 0 a possible value?
0.
Including or excluding 1? Is 1 a possible?
One.
Exactly, perfectly right. Then,
Then it multiplies it with the width. So you
exactly, so you get a value.
the range you want, so like 0 to 10.
In our case, 0 to 10, 10 excluded, correct. And what does the math.floor do?
It moves all the
All the digits after the decimal place.
yes.
So 4.1 will become 4, 4.9 will become 4. Floor, down here. The opposite would be ceiling. That would round up to the next higher integer number. Got it? So this is a very typical topic, a very typical, let's say, pattern that you frequently do when you need a random value. We do that for X, we do that for Y, and here, see, we simply check whether mine X and mine Y are not the same coordinates as the user clicked, because it would be kind of boring if the user could do the first click and immediately lose the game on the first click. That wouldn't be funny. And this is an awesome example, because here we see that our AI made a significant mistake. Who can see it? This is wrong.
I think my Copilot found it.
Why?
I don't
What
know.
did your Copilot say?
Mines.sum.
Exactly. Can you understand what it did? Okay. Does anybody without Copilot have an idea what's going on here? Yes, give it a try.
I think it looks if there is already a mine there.
Exactly. What could happen if we are very, very unlucky? We could get X and Y values twice or 3 times. If we are really unlucky, we could end up with a single mine in our entire field. So what we need to do here is we need to say this is important, but additionally we need an additional check. And as a human I say, okay, it's not okay if it's the same position, but additionally or I get a check. Let me quickly describe that and then we'll go into a break, okay? Here. Now we go into a break. Let me show you what this is. This is hard to read, right? But it's really nice. What it says, please look through all the existing mines. If there is at least one mine, which position is at the coordinates that I just came up with randomly, if this happens, then we need to repeat this until we find a location where no mine is already placed. Got it? If we have some mines, which essentially can only be one, so if you have any mine that is on a position, that is on the position that we just randomly selected, then we have to repeat the process. Got it? And this is why it's so important to verify what AI gives you. This is why you have to learn coding also by hand, because AI makes mistakes. Good, nice. I like that one. And with that, let's do a break and let's continue after the break, okay? Very good. Let's go into the last hour. And now that we have covered some of the basics, I would like to copy some code into our solution, because I would like to spend the last hour with TypeScript and some tools around TypeScript. Now, one thing is pretty simple. When the user clicks on a cell here, we can check whether the user clicked on a mine. And again, GitHub Copilot is suggesting this sum construct. It's really, really useful, as you can see here. Let's find out what it does. It says, if mines contains at least one mine whose position is equal to the position where the user clicked, then the game is over. Can you read the code? Remember this syntax. Sum is a really, really useful method in many situations. And in our case, we simply say message.innerText equals game over. That's enough. That's fine. And last but not least, in order for us to continue, that's 2024, 25. This is what I wanted. Yep. Give me a second. I have my preparation for today's lecture. I've prepared a method, and I will copy this method to your Discord server. Now you have a link to this method, which is called OpenCell. Simply copy the method into your Visual Studio Code solution. Should be a separate function, and hopefully if I didn't screw up, there shouldn't be any errors, and we simply call open cell with X and Y. Now this method open cell is, as you can see here, a recursive method, and it opens up all the different cells. That's the idea here. I will not go into the details how it works. I ask you to take a look at this method at home so you can at least read it. But for the lecture, I would like to focus on different topics, so we will just copy in the code. Now you have a question. Yep. That is correct. Absolutely. We would need an additional property called game over, and we would need to check it. If you take a look at my lecture notes, you will find this property. But I will not complete this game here because I want to focus on different things. Take a look at my sample solution and you will find exactly what you just noted. Yes. Was it the same comment or a similar comment, or?
What is the open class? The
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. The opened class, we are missing the opened thing here. Thank you very much. Here we need const opened class, open, and we need to change this one to opened, something like this, and we say background color light gray. That's just changing the color. Okay? So let's give it a try if it really works. Let's put here, and you see it opened correctly. Now I can mark it, I can press here, I can press here, I can try this one, and it says game over. So we have a working game. We only copied a few lines, but it works. Okay? I give you a few moments to catch up. Very nice. So now we are going to do the following. I would like with you together to translate this entire solution to TypeScript. I ask you to close your development environment and to simply copy the folder Minesweeper into Minesweeper-ts or whatever you like it. We simply copy it so that we get a TypeScript version of our application. Minesweeper-ts. And please open this solution that you just copied in Visual Studio Code. Question, what do we have to do? Yeah?
There's no question at the index HTML. What did you exactly do with the open?
Nothing. The opened is set in JavaScript here. See? No, here. See it? This was the method that you copied from GitHub.
Yes.
Yeah. And there it uses the open. In HTML, you don't need to do anything with this style. The only thing is you need to add the style to styles.css. It doesn't get white. Let me help you. Problem solved. Typo. The cell click? Selbstverständlich. Of course I can show you. This is the handle cell click, and at the end I'm simply calling open cell. Do you have a problem? Do you need help? Okay. If you haven't, let me know. Question? Yep.
somehow.
Okay, I will. Okay, good. So let's switch to TypeScript finally. Questions, dear colleagues. What do I have to change in my project in order to have TypeScript available? Now this is an important one. Yes?
You first of all have to run tsc -init.
tsc -init doesn't work.
You have to install TypeScript
Nice. How do I do that?
That would be
npm
install
install.
TypeScript,
No. What do I have to do first? You are right, but you are missing one step.
install Node.js.
No, Node.js is already here.
Well, we could either install it globally or we could set up a node project.
Exactly, and that is what I want from you. We can set up a node project. How do I set up a node project? Yes? Wonderful. You really have good JavaScript skills. I like that. npm init. npm init. That gives us a package JSON file. And now we can do what you suggested. We can install TypeScript. npm install TypeScript. If I say -d, what does that mean? Yes? A def dependency. That means that's a dependency that is only required for compiling, not for running the application. Good. Let's install TypeScript. Very good. Then the next suggestion from you was also very correct. You wanted to install, do init TypeScript. And we do that by calling tsc -- init. Doesn't work. What do I have to change? I just installed TypeScript. Why doesn't tsc work? It should be there. It's the TypeScript compiler, yeah?
This would be the global command, so you would have to
I-
install that
okay.
globally, but we
Very
don't
good
wanna do
thing.
that.
Yeah,
So we do npx, which is the npm executor.
very good.
Npx tsc.
So-
instead of tsc.
You already know what installing something globally means. Avoid it. Do not install tools globally. Always install tools locally. Do not install TypeScript globally. Do not install Angular globally. We install everything locally. Only very, very few exceptions from that rule. And you perfectly correctly said we have to use npx, node package execute, tsc -- init, in order to find the TypeScript compiler locally. And that works like a charm. Now we have package JSON, package lock JSON, and tsconfig. You know, this lecture today is primarily for me to get to know you, what base skills you already have. And I have to admit, pretty good. You know a lot. I really like that. Do I have to describe what package lock JSON is, or do you also know what package lock JSON is all about? Who can help me? Who can try to describe what package lock JSON is? I didn't create it. It just appeared from somewhere, magically.
In the package.json, first of all,
Yep.
we have a list of dependencies. We have
Yeah,
a list
let me quickly show this.
Yeah.
Here you have the
We
dependency.
We have a list of
Yeah.
dependencies and def dependencies.
Yes.
Dependencies,
Yes,
and we have versions on each of those dependencies.
exactly.
There are special characters that npm uses to specify, for instance, that it's a specific
Yeah.
major version, but the
Yeah.
minor version could be any minor version. I'm not sure what this one of the things that
Yep.
adds up to. I know that there's I think hashtag and
Yep.
simple. Anyway, the difference between package.json and package.lock.json is that package.lock.json also includes all the minor versions as precise as needed,
Okay.
which means that if we only have a package.json,
Uh-huh.
different developers might be using different minor versions, for instance, or different patch versions of
Yeah.
a dependency, while the package.lock.json specifies it.
Okay, can I interrupt you for a second? Everything you say is correct.
Yes.
In our situation, many of the things that you just described are not super relevant because we already have the latest version of TypeScript. In our situation, if we go to package lock.json, you will see that's the same version. So all the things that you said are correct if we are using older versions and complex version specifier. The most important thing for us here in this situation is this one. What is that? Integrity SHA-512 something. What does that mean? That means that we have a so-called hash value of the package, and when we install TypeScript from the internet, the system will check whether it is the correct version of the library. if some bad hacker hacks into your system, redirects your DNS queries, and try to ship a modified TypeScript compiler to you, NPM will warn you because it will detect that the hash value isn't correct. So it's a security measure. So yours is correct, version management, and a security aspect that nobody can send you manipulated packages. Are we good? Good. Nice. What happens if I delete package log.json? Is that a problem? Not at all. If you delete package log.json, you can simply again call npm install and it will regenerate the package log.json. In real life, with larger projects, it's a little bit more complicated, but for now, it's perfectly fine. Now that we have TypeScript, we have to think about certain compiler options. Let's talk about the most important compiler options that we need in this course. The first ones, these ones, we can all forget about them. Let's delete it. The target is ES-Next. That means in this course, we are going to use the latest and greatest version of JavaScript. In practice, sometimes you are forced to use older versions of JavaScript. And in this case, you have to specify something else. But ES-Next is the latest and greatest version. We don't need all this stuff. Modules. For our very simple demo, we are going to use none. We are going to talk about modules a little bit later. A lot of stuff that we can delete. Here we are. A lot of stuff that we can delete. A lot of stuff we can delete. This is the next important setting. First, consistent casing in file names. If you work on Windows, you probably know that Windows is not case sensitive when it comes to file names. But we want to be case sensitive. So this forces you to use correct file names. In this course, we will always work with strict mode. That is the highest mode in TypeScript to protect you from, let's say, ugly coding. I really ask you to use strict true, and you ask me for coding conventions, strict true, warning free. That is what we are heading for. Okay? A lot of stuff that you can remove, a lot of stuff that we can remove. We can remove essentially everything else. For debugging purposes, I highly recommend that you add source map true. That will generate source maps and allow you to debug TypeScript and not the generated JavaScript. That's really, really useful. You had a question or a comment? Good. Very good. So now these are the settings that we need for TypeScript. Do you need to remember these settings? Obviously not. Obviously not. We are going to use Angular, and Angular will create the necessary settings for you. But it's important to see the most important settings that we use in this course, and that's also settings that Angular uses.
We still need the root directory and the out directory.
No, we don't need it.
Oh,
I will just use it in the same folder. That's fine. So now let's rename index.js to index.ts. Please do so. And then watch the beauty of TypeScript play out. That is exactly what we want. A lot of errors. Because that is what TypeScript is all about. It adds the necessity for typing. So now we need to go through our JavaScript code and add types where appropriate. Line by line. Here you see cells. I already asked you what is the type of cells, and we found out that it's a HTML div element array. Got it? That is a type. We simply tell TypeScript this is the type that cell is all about. Here we do no longer need the comment anymore. We simply say this is an object containing x and y coordinates as an array or undefined. We already talked about that. Now app here also gives us an error, because here with the get element by ID, TypeScript doesn't know whether the result will be a paragraph element or a div element or an h1 element. So we have to add a type here as HTML div element. Message will be an as HTML paragraph element. See? And you see, more and more errors go away. That's beautiful. Let's scroll down. Parameters, number, parameter, number, return value, void. Again, some errors went away. Mine X, number, mine Y, number. Scroll down. X, number, Y, number, void. Scroll down. Here, mines could be null. In our case, we know that open cell is called after mines was initialized. So here, come on, we can use the bang operator. We can say, TypeScript, leave me alone. I am sure that mines isn't null. So I'm simply using the exclamation mark, and it tells me, I always remember you hit your fist on the table and you say, I'm sure this is null. This is why I'm using the bang operator, right? Here we essentially made a mistake. So, sorry. Now it's silent. Here we made a mistake. Mines around is a number, in the text is a string. So what is missing? ToString. That is the power of TypeScript. It tells me when I make mistakes like that. And then we have handle cell, right click, number and void. See? And now we are wording free. This is what TypeScript is all about. Adding types to JavaScript. If you write modern JavaScript, it looks very similar to TypeScript. But TypeScript gives you the additional safety because it understands types. It points you to mistakes. So TypeScript, if you ask me, is much better for medium to large software projects to work on. Do I personally sometimes use JavaScript instead of TypeScript? What do you think? Yeah, of course. If I'm quick and dirty, just implementing a prototype or a quick tool that I'm using for a certain task and then I don't want to use it anymore, of course I'm using JavaScript. I don't care about types. And if it crashes at runtime, I don't care. Do you agree? Are we good? Nice. Next questions, ladies and gentlemen, how do I compile? I know that you know it. Anybody else? Come on, how do I call the TypeScript compiler? You know that. Yeah. TSC. TSC doesn't work. What is the problem? Yes?
TSC index.ts?
No. Exactly. TSC is not installed globally. TypeScript compiler is installed locally. npx TSC. So your answer was correct, but you forgot the npx. Okay? Run it. And let's see. Magically, we get a JavaScript and a map file. Yeah.
Does executing TSC from package.json make it execute?
Excellent question. If you go to package.json and you add a script, build, and you call TSC here, the question is, do I need npx here? The answer is no. This is fine. And let me tell you the secret why this works. In reality, there is a folder node modules, and I guess you already know about node modules, right? From your previous years. So far, I learned you a little, I got to know you a little bit, so I can imagine what kind of knowledge you have, and I guess you understand what node modules is. So if you take a look at node modules, we will find the TypeScript compiler here. But additionally, there is this very special folder which is called .bin. And if we take a look at the .bin folder, we, take a look, find our TypeScript compiler there. Essentially what this file is, it is simply redirecting to a folder, lib.tsc.js, whatever that is. It will run the TypeScript compiler for us. And now listen closely, because that answers your question. When you run a script here, Node will automatically append the path of your computer with Node modules bin. So when you run something here, it will automatically look up scripts here in the bin folder. Okay? That's the answer. So this is fine. npm run build will do exactly the same. Very good question. Yes?
Is every dev dependency add a binary?
No, not every dev dependency, but many dev dependencies. Every dev dependency that has a CLI, a command line interface. But there might be dev dependencies that don't have a CLI. Types, for instance, is a good example. Yes?
I have an error with inside the node module.
Okay, let's take a look at errors. Okay, so we were successful in compiling TypeScript to JavaScript, and we talked a little bit about where the TypeScript compiler is looked at, and I hope this demo showed you the advantages and the requirements of turning JavaScript into TypeScript. For me, the learning is you have quite good base knowledge about JavaScript and TypeScript. That I really like that a lot. So this should simply now work. So if I take a look at my Minesweeper and I go live here, let's open this one up in the browser, and it should give us exactly the same game as before. Yep, so now our TypeScript version works. And please note that when I go to sources, I have my index.ts, and I can really set breakpoints in TypeScript, and still it works because we are using here source maps. That allows you to debug TypeScript. You do not have to debug JavaScript. That's super useful. Angular will do all the configuration for you. When we switch to Angular, we do not need to care about tsconfig at all. It will configure everything for us. That's really, really useful. Last but not least, and I would ask you to just look at my computer, because we only have a few minutes left and I would like to close that one. Let me show you what I mean. In my lecture script, you find a last version which is called 030 Vite. And let me show you what Vite brings to the table. So far, we just compiled everything and we needed the Liveserver in order to get a web server. Programs like Vite are development servers. So as you can see here in the package file, in addition to TypeScript, I also installed Vite. It's really just, yeah, it's the French word vite. I think it's called, what does it mean? Fast, quick, something like this. And if you install Vite, you get very interesting capabilities. You can simply say, let me open the terminal for you, npx vite. That's it. And you will, what? Npm install. I forgot to run npm install, I'm sorry. And I say npx vite. And I get within 209 milliseconds, I get a ready-made development web server, and it works like a charm. So I'm not dependent on the development environment, but I get the development web server from Vite. It doesn't matter where you are, in WebStorm, in VI, in Visual Studio Code, you simply get this server and it's brutally fast. It's really, really fast. In addition to that, auto reloading, when you change the code, the browser refreshes automatically. All these things are available with Vite. And last but not least, the most powerful thing is, you can use Vite to build the code for a production server. You simply run the TypeScript compiler and then Vite build. So npm run build runs the TypeScript compiler and then Vite build. And then you get a dist folder, and there your entire application is in the dist folder. What you will probably see is these strange file names. That's the last info for today. What are these strange additions to the file names? Who knows it? It's no longer called index.js. It's called index CKVFWAR-JS. Why? Okay, I give you a tip, maybe that helps. Cache busting. No idea? You see? Normally, you want to download the JavaScript files of an application to the client one time, and then you want the client to cache these JavaScript files. So imagine you build a great application and you want to have the best possible startup performance for the end user. The end user should download the JavaScript file, and next time he visits your site, it should be something like this, and everything should be there. So web servers and clients typically cache files. Now, what could be the problem with long-term caching of JavaScript files? If the name is the same, for instance, if you change your JavaScript file, you fix a bug, then the user visits your website again and he wants the bug-fixed version. Will he get the bug-fixed version? No, because the browser will use the cached version of your JavaScript file. Now, what do you think these characters are all about?
It's basically just updating the file name so the browser is forced to use a newer version because it cannot do the cache.
Perfect. That's exactly. These are hash values. So if you change a single character in your application, a new file name will be generated and the browser will fetch the newest and latest, greatest version of your app. And that is called cache busting. You are preventing the user to use his local cache when a new version of your app is put online. And Vite is doing all this stuff for you. It's handling the file names, it's brutally fast, it's coordinating TypeScript and all this stuff. And guess what? Angular uses Vite. So when we use Angular, we do not have to care about this. That's the important thing, and that's what I wanted you to see. Okay, give me a second, I want to close. I ask you to think about the things that I showed you, and I have one homework for you until next week. I want you to sit down, take my lecture notes, and build a tic-tac-toe from it. You can simply copy my files. Take the version from Vite. Go to GitHub, okay? Take this one here. Take the latest version, this one, with Vite. Copy it. And then rebuild it to a tic-tac-toe. It's much simpler. Way simpler. No complex stuff. Just 3 by 3. Just X and O. And a very simple winner detection. But that shouldn't take you longer than 30 minutes or 45 minutes or something like this. But it's a perfect way to recap what we did today. So this is my homework for you, okay? I do not have a GitHub link to hand in the homework for this week. So I cannot and will not check whether you really do it, but please do it. Starting next week, you will get GitHub links where you can check in your homework. So for now, the lecture is officially closed. Thank you for listening. If you have additional questions, just come to the front and ask me. I'm happy to answer all your questions. Thank you very much for today. See you next week.